My grandmother literally slapped me across the face a couple of times. Whap! You're an American.
Julie Iverson and Babar Khan on adjusting to America.
Humans, we are complicated.
I can control that in terms of...
Howard Lieberman and Loren Niemi on not adjusting to anti-Semitism.
Jews feel that they may have to make a quick getaway.
Right, but the question is to where?
Our nation of immigrants is struggling with itself. That's our theme tonight. We begin with Howard and Loren.
This is Democratic Visions.
Let me ask you a question, Loren. I'm Jewish, you know, obviously.
Well, yeah.
We've talked about that. I'm very concerned, for the first time in my life, that this is no longer a safe country for Jews. Maybe it never was. But at some point in the last 10 years, it feels like we've gone from, well, we tolerate those Jews as long as they know their place, to we hate Jews. And it's not just ye or whatever the hell he calls himself these days. There is anti-Semitism everywhere.
Well, I agree. Historically, the city of Minneapolis was one of the most anti-Semitic cities, in the country. There were, we talk about covenants. There were covenants against, selling property to Jews. There were covenants against selling property to blacks. I mean, on one level, you think, who the hell are you going to sell property to? You're eliminating more and more of the market with every covenant. The issue becomes, how do you measure fear? And as people's level of fear rises around their individual well-being, economic or psychological or cultural, and that's the real issue for most people, is they feel as though their culture is somehow under attack. You have to look for another. You have to look for someone to say it is their fault. And frankly, in the Western tradition, Christianity has chosen to blame the Jews. Well, even though the Romans crucified Jesus.
That's just a little point.
But that is the source of it.
I know.
So,
I know. But it's been said that Jews always carry around a psychological go bag, meaning they believe that at any moment, they'll need to flee.
Right.
Jews back into parking spaces on a per capita basis more than Gentiles. Why is that? And it's an interesting phenomenon. And I am a person who always backs into a space or pulls through. And I'm flabbergasted when people don't pull through. And I've listened to a discussion that Jews feel that they may have to make a quick getaway.
Right, but the question is to where?
To nowhere. Could I make what's called aliyah to Israel and go home to Israel? Well, Israel has never been my home.
And frankly, Israel is moving more and more to the right, to being an unwelcome place for anyone who's liberal, anyone who requires justice.
But they have to take me.
Oh, well, that's
they have
true.
to take me. If
I
I want to go, I can go to Israel. And I don't understand emotionally this turn back to virulent anti-Semitism of the Kanye West type of anti-Semitism, the one that says Jews are evil, Jews do this, Jews do that, Jews own this, Jews are a cabal of people who want to dominate the world. There's a saying amongst Jews that if you have two Jews in a room, you've got 5 different points of view. And there's a lot of truth to that. So there's no cabal. There's just a group of people who have chosen, far longer than Christians have chosen, to believe in a monotheistic God. Mm-hmm. A little brief story. I'm walking during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic. I'm walking down the street, and a woman comes out of her house. And I know her, because Stillwater, and kind of know everybody. Screaming about, I'm a Jew, and I know that this whole pandemic thing, this COVID thing, is a Jewish plot, that George Soros is putting money to spread this so that they can sell vaccines, they can take over the country, and And at that point, I have two options. One, walk up to this woman and punch her lights out, which would have felt really heartwarming at the time. Or two, ignore her and keep walking, which felt cowardly, but I chose to just walk on. Why is it so easy, though? I mean, if somebody was to say something racist, they would be like persona non grata. But to say something anti-Semitic, well, people talk about Yee, people talk about Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving, he was suspended for 11 whole games for espousing anti-Semitic points of view. If he was a white person espousing an equally vile racist point of view, trust me, it wouldn't have been 11 games. And so we don't like anti-Semitism. We don't think it's a good thing as a country. It just makes us feel bad. But it's okay. I mean, it's okay. Just keep it to yourself. And if you let it slip, we may have to slap you on the wrist and let you go on your way. Why are we giving any airtime to Kanye West? Why are we giving any airtime to Kyrie Irving, who should not be playing? Because they're just talking about Jews. We all know we hate Jews.
No. We're giving them airtime because it feeds into the sense of celebrity. You know, we love in the media the extremes. This is why, you know, a film with lots of shooting and lots of guns, you know, no one thinks twice about it until it comes down to, oh, there's someone shooting up the supermarket. And then all of a sudden but even then we don't make a connection between the culture that we offer every day and the way we ignore the connection of that culture to actual behavior.
That's a very good point.
So let me give you a little story. So I'm up in northern Minnesota and I walk into a bar in Virginia, Minnesota, and on the wall there is a sign that says, "No fins, no knives, no dogs." And I'm glad that I'm at the top of the list. And that is a historical sign, and yet I know that even until World War II, Finns were suspect. And why? They were suspect because they were the principal organizers of the strike of 1916, and they were blackballed from the mines after that. In other places, Italians were suspect, Poles were suspect. It's always, you know, there's always a need for someone to be the other who is suspect, and we sublimate and generalize our discomfort and our hate. The problem with anti-Semitism is that most people have no exposure. It's interesting because everyone talks about Jews, but most people have no exposure to Jews. Who's a Jew? How would you know? Particularly if once you get out of major cities.
Well, and it's interesting though. I mean, I was married to an Italian-American woman back quite a number of years ago. And her father would tell me stories about the inability to get a job when you were Italian because you don't want to hire Italians, you don't want to hire Irish.
Right.
Irish need not apply was
Right.
always there.
Oh yeah.
But the one thing that they don't have that we have, this hatred of Jews has been around forever.
Right.
And it will be around probably forever. And that's really troublesome. And let me say this. If I'd say to you, you're a real Christian, people go, that's a compliment. He's a real Christian.
I don't know
If
about
someone
that.
if someone says, I'm a real Jew, that's pejorative, and that's a real difference. The word Christian is sort of a positive, whereas Jew is pejorative.
Well, again, but part that again goes back to the historically dominant culture. You know, so Joseph Campbell says that when you are inside the myth makes perfect sense. And when you are outside the myth, you say, why would anyone believe this? Christianity has been the myth, you know, for 2,000 years, ever since the Romans decided it was easier to co-opt the church than to fight the church, right? So that myth of, you know, the myth that we are a Christian country, the myth that the Western culture is Christian culture, and that because of Christianity we have experienced, you know, progress, that is God's blessing. I'm not sure it's any different than the mythology that, you know, the Jews are the chosen people, and therefore, you know, for them, God's blessing is that they preserve in the face of all this bullshit.
Persevere. I think.
Persevere.
Yeah,
Wow.
we do. There is a pervasive fear in the Jewish community today.
And
that is-
yes, I recognize that.
that is significantly greater than at any time in my life.
There is a similar kind of fear in the black community.
Sure.
And there's a similar kind of fear in the Muslim community. Again, you know, and it is because groups which are marginal, right, you know, feel as though there is no longer a check on expressing hate. And in that, I am absolutely in agreement with you.
I've always wondered, back during the Crusades, when the Christians kind of came down on Jews and Muslims, why didn't they become friends? Why didn't they say, you know what, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and why didn't we build a bridge back then? I don't know. During many periods in the civil rights movement, Jews, Jewish people, so we don't have a pejorative, played a fairly significant role in the civil rights movement. Why didn't we become friends? Why didn't we become as one? I don't have an answer for that. I raised the question. It troubles me. If you look at Muslims and Jews, one says salam, the other says shalom. Neither of them eat pork. One talks about halal, and the other talks about kosher. They're pretty much the same people.
Oh yeah, they
And
come
if-
from the same. They come from the same father, Abraham.
And if we believe all that, but that's true. We come from the same father, and over tens of thousands of years, you can't tell me that we all didn't intermarry. And I've got some of the Muslim genes in me. In fact, I'm partially Bedouin. I found out, and there are plenty of people who are staunch Arabists who probably have more Jewish blood in their veins than they care to realize, and vice versa. Why can't we all get along? And look at the dominant race over there, the Christian, the white Christian, and say, maybe it's time for us to take a look at you. I don't mean you personally, Loren, because I know you, and I like you.
To get in touch with Howard or Loren, send an email to democraticvisions@gmail.com.
Interesting.
Minneapolis resident Julie Iverson describes herself as a social activator. Julie was raised in Bismarck, North Dakota, with the help of her strong Lebanese grandmother. Babar Khan was raised in Pakistan. Babar and I live in Eden Prairie. Now, nearly 30% of our 64,000 neighbors are categorized as members of minorities. Those with family roots in East Africa and South Asia are mostly Muslim. Babar is a community leader who understands the challenges faced by immigrants.
When I came here to the United States, around 89, 91, to do my master's, at that time, I was Mr. Nobody. People did not care. Who are you? Okay. I mean, you are working with your colleagues, you are working with on your research, your professors know, but we are walking on the street, nobody cared what I was doing. So I'm going to Walmart, I'm going back home. In between there is a green patch of grass or a park, and I offered my prayers. And it was perfectly fine, nobody cared, because I was nobody.
Mm-hmm.
In the last few years, when things started targeting people as new immigrant, that's where labels were created, what Muslims are, what immigrants are. Immigrants are taking everything from chewing up the economy. They are dependent. So that vacuum, that nobody to somebody was not neutral now. It was with that negative twist. So that nobody was far better, I feel than becoming somebody that got the labels from someone. So I had to write some articles, what immigrants are and what new immigrants bring. to this
Yeah.
country. For example, when we come from, especially from South Asia, coming here to do our masters for higher studies, we pay twice the tuition than the local population.
Oh, yeah.
So first we put the money, then we get the degree, then we earn. They're making the universities more rich, or kind of a more economically viable because they pay more. We started writing because we felt that there is a gap. People don't understand. Same is with the faith. Like my dad was praying. It is funny, like he was praying in the office and someone called 911 saying, hey, Ansar is doing something which is, we don't know what he's doing, something. And then police came in, and then my dad was like finishing his prayer and he said, what's going on? And so things, there is something, I don't know if you, how you see those things happening.
I'm not entirely the other side. My grandmother was from Lebanon. Actually, it wasn't even Lebanon in the early 1900s. It was the Ottoman Empire, and ended up in North Dakota, homesteading. We were Christian. There were Muslims who came, because it was half and half. And so I was, in the 1960s, I knew something about Islam, which in North Dakota, pretty rare. It's not just individual attitude or American attitude that's changed. My grandmother literally slapped me across the face a couple of times growing up. We lived with her when I was young. My mother was divorced, and she went home to her mother, and we lived with her, and I was a little oppositional from time to time. But I would try to speak Arabic.
Okay. Well.
Whap! You're an American. She was just fierce. Her children and her grandchildren were Americans. Now, my grandmother, because of circumstances, did not read or write in any language, not Arabic, not French, not English. And she would keep house out on the North Dakota prairie and stuff. Winters, when there were no fields to tend, her father would go back and bring over a couple more kids.
Okay.
She made sure her siblings went to school. She supported her sister in becoming an attorney. Then my grandmother raised a heart surgeon, chiropractor, a couple of attorneys. My mother went to post-secondary conservatory for music.
Okay.
My mother's older sister worked and had a career, not in politics, but in the North Dakota legislature. All of my women in my life, my examples were, we do what we want to do. If somebody gets in our way, we try and reason with them.
Right.
That doesn't work, we might, pull out the gloves. But that has changed a lot about the immigrant attitude. Not that immigrants don't want their children to succeed and stuff, but there's more, we want to retain the old culture. We want to retain much more of the old identity. Now, we pulled out drums once in a while. My grandmother and my aunts and uncles spoke Arabic to one another, but not us. We could understand when they were swearing, but that was about it. And, I had to beg my grandmother to teach me to cook any of the dishes I grew up with. And so it isn't just, it's not just the American attitude about whether immigrants are giving or taking. It's also the immigrant attitude of how much do we want to give? How much of our, not ourselves, but of our identity do we want to give? And so I think we're still a melting pot, but we simmer and maybe at more layers than we used to. And it takes a good strong stir once in a while to keep us functioning as one social, one political entity, which is tough.
Sometimes the question is, do we really have to do that? Should the pot has only one taste of curry, or should we keep those parts separate and enjoy? Because every flavor, every aroma, every gesture, every culture is so different, and you can be, and that I think that is something when people migrate to United States, is that it is where they feel like they can have their own identity with the same kind of American spirit and dream. And I think that is where this it becomes a land of opportunity. I remember like when I was I took the oath, and I still admire one of those judges, I think, who administered the oath. And he said, when we talk about that you are now a citizen of the United States and your allegiance is with the country, there is no expectation that you have to lose your identity. He said, I moved from Poland, I'm a Polish from my roots, and I still want to cook some Polish food and serve it because I really like it. And I think that is something that if we put our efforts in enjoying different flavors with the common kind of a theme of being American, I think our energy will be more used in the right directions, maybe.
Well, I totally agree. And I also, earlier you talked a little bit about how we apply labels. And I think that's become more and more, a lot of this I think goes to how we handle education, and particularly higher education in this country. A professor friend of mine gets very upset at how much energy we put into using education to sort people. And now we don't sort black kids and poor kids into vocational tasks as much as we used to, but we still very much use it as a sorting system. And it has also been corporatized to the point where, I mean, we no longer teach kids how to learn, we educate them to do specific tasks.
Right.
And to contribute to our 80% consumer economy. Toss them out and get them a job so they can spend money. Otherwise, we're going, but that's very much a part of the labeling frenzy. And the labeling is so important. It's not only important externally, but it has become important internally. Do I belong? Do I belong in the right places to get where I think I want to be? Sometimes I wonder whether I want to be that or somebody planted that in my head. You know, but there are so many ways that labels, I mean, by their very nature, they're divisive, right? To say, you're Pakistani American and I'm Lebanese American is by its very nature calling out our differences and dividing us. And to talk about black and white or college educated versus GED or upper class versus lower class, middle class, all of those are, you know, at least in part, ways of dividing people. And I think one of the great concerns I have is that we are not educating ourselves and our children to recognize some of these things. That's a pretty basic premise. Interesting though, in North Dakota, the prejudice was against American Indians, Native Americans. And when we got tan in the summer, we were the damned Indians. We were not Lebanese, we were not Muslim, we were the damned Indians. Which was interesting, to say the least. We like being in the dark a little bit.
Sometimes I think there is a common thread in politics, whether we are in the United States or we are in any other part of the world. I think labels, when I see labels like any identities, so far we are not attaching anything negative. It is all good because sometimes it helps understand. And we used to be at one point we used to be very open in like picking on each other based upon just like in universities, colleges, and schools, we pick on each other for different reasons without getting to taking everything personal.
I think we are now. Think of the number of songs and books you can't sing or read anymore.
Humans, we are complicated. So, so it is about not only like seeing the color, the accent, and but at the same time, everyone has their own perception also. That brings one more dimension. But the thing is that when we try to put negative things, or when we take it to a different dimension, for example, which is the political divide, because we want to sell ourselves in politics. So like we talked about, like whether it's in India, Pakistan, when politicians will be talking, they will be saying, I'm going to be your savior from the other side. And that's what we do in the United States. It's such a global formula.
If there is one overriding change that saddens me about my country, which I love dearly, it's that we, as a nation, imbued with optimism. And we aren't anymore.
Yeah.
Many, many people in this country, the bedrock messaging of this country, whether it's news, politics, or economics, are not messages of positivity. They're messages of, you need more, we're no longer first, we have to, and the militarization of our language, our common everyday references to things, winning, and just all of these ways in which you could apply many of the same terms to how you refer to a military conflict as we do apply to political conflicts,
Right.
or rhetorical conflict.
Yeah.
And that's sad, and it's also not helpful.
Yeah. Now this is you raised a very good point. I think this is one of the things which drives to success in all different ways. So far we have that optimism.
I wonder though, how much do you think that the history and perspective are synonymous with bias, or are they just part of what forms your biases?
History is in general, you just don't know which history you are reading, and because history sometimes already has a bias. History is always written by who is the winner, who is the conqueror. But there is in between there are facts, and I think that is something which is important, and that's where I think there is a deficit in the United States in terms of learning history, and we see even in geography, because I think both go hand in hand. And I know, like when I was in the curriculum committee of Eden Prairie High School, I wanted teachers to talk about when they teach history, they teach global history. Like when we talk about what was happening in the United States at that time, what was happening in Asia, what was happening in South America, in Middle East, because sometimes we have raised the kids as if when we were prospering, everyone was in darkness and uneducated. And I think that needs to be that needs some cracks of curiosity to understand what was happening, because people were educated in other regions. They were also culturally rich. Then when those cracks happens and of curiosity, then they will learn, try to learn what was happening. Oh, it's not just like we need to teach them, how we can learn from them. Thank you, Julie, for being with us at Democratic Visions and talking to us. I really appreciate your presence. It has been a wonderful discussion with you.
Oh, it's been
Babar Khan is part of the Democratic Visions team. He also serves on the Eden Prairie Human Rights and Diversity Commission and other groups. Julie and Babar can also be contacted by email. Just send it to democraticvisions@gmail.com. That's democraticvisions@gmail.com.
Democratic Visions is handcrafted by volunteers from Eden Prairie, Hopkins, Minnetonka, Edina, and Bloomington. Watch us on select cable systems and on our YouTube channel. This is Carol Sundstrom.